Good afternoon and happy Sabbath, everyone. I want to welcome you to another presentation by Barbara O'Neill. The topic for this afternoon is herbs as a natural remedy. Please be reminded to take notes and to share the link with your friends and relatives. At this time, I'll read the scripture, which is taken from Psalm 104, verse 14. I'm reading from the King James Version, and it reads thus: He causeth the grass to grow for the cattle, and herbs for the service of man, that he may bring forth food out of the earth. Let us pray. Loving Lord, we come together this afternoon again to share understanding of your word and how we can better serve each other, Lord. As we sit and listen and glean from the information that Barbara is about to give us, Lord, give us the knowledge to use these things wisely and to honor your name in whatever we do or say, I pray. Amen. Please play the video now. Thank you.
So welcome to our afternoon session where we'll be talking about herbs, and the psalm that tells us about herbs is Psalm 104 verse 14, where it says, God made herbs for the service of man. And in a study of herbs, one begins to see that, and of course in the study of the herbs, what you do is you study the actions of the herb, and you also study the components of the herb. And as you do this, you begin to see that every herb has a different effect on different parts of the body. So as I go through this, I'll be looking at herbs, but I'll also be looking at different body parts and the herbs that can help with that. But what I'd like to begin with today, I'd like to begin with slippery elm. Now, slippery elm is the powdered bark of the slippery elm tree, and slippery elm can be used externally and it can be used internally. And yesterday, one of the last poultices we did was a combination of slippery elm and charcoal. Do you remember that? And that was a poultice used for a variety of things, bee stings, wasp bites, any case of poisoning. I also mentioned that it can be used for a very upset stomach. It could also be used for a congested chest. I did also mention that Jethro Kloss, in his book Back to Eden, he says that the slippery elm is one of the deeper drawers. I did talk about castor oil yesterday, that it penetrates very, very deep, but the castor oil is totally different. It's not drawing anything out. So it's important to know the differences. It comes from the castor oil plant. The castor oil penetrates very deep. It breaks up lumps, bumps, congestions, adhesions, scar tissues. The slippery elm goes deep, but it draws. It's a drawer. So that's where it can be used externally. The slippery elm can also be used on the scalp. And to use it on the scalp, Now the herb that is a specific for all scalp issues, so we might look at scalp for a moment. For all scalp issues is rosemary. And this is rosemary essential oil. The essential oils are expensive, but please remember that it takes about a whole bucket of the herb to get almost one drop of the oil, so no wonder they're expensive. But it's important to remember that, realizing that they're also very, very strong. So your scalp herb is your rosemary. Does it have to be an essential oil? You can make a tea with that, but of course it won't be as strong. But then again, you could bring it to the boil and slowly simmer a lot of rosemary in a little water, and you can certainly make it a lot stronger. So anything to do with the head, you would use rosemary essential oil. So with the scalp, we've got a few issues there, and one can be head lice. So with head lice, you can paint the scalp with slippery elm. You put water with it to make it like a soft gel. But with head lice, so we're looking at slippery elm, these are all the things you can do with slippery elm when we're looking at the scalp. So with slippery elm, if you're going to use it for head lice, you've got to put something in there that's incredibly strong. So you can use thyme oil. So thyme essential oil is very, very strong, and the head lice hate it. So what you can do is you could make, let's say for this you would do half a cup of slippery elm, and in that half a cup you might put 1.5 cups of water. So in that mix you might put probably 6 drops of thyme essential oil, and that's very, very strong, but you've got about 1.5 cups of gel. And how would you paint the scalp? What you do is and before I was a psychiatric nurse, I was a hairdresser. So when we used to dye hair, we'd divide the head into sections, and then we'd put the comb in and paint one bit, and then paint another bit, and then paint another bit. So you get the gist, so that the whole head is covered with this mixture that can kill head lice. And then you would keep that all wrapped up. You could put a shower cap on or plastic bag round and tie it in a knot. You would want to keep it there for about 4 hours. So head lice, it can be used for that. What about if someone's got a very dry scalp, dandruff, or sometimes psoriasis in the scalp? The slippery elm can be excellent for cleaning that up and nourishing it. So what you would do then is you'd do a similar amount of this, but this time you'd put the rosemary essential oil in, because the rosemary essential oil is very nourishing to the scalp. So let's say dry scalp, eczema. Some people do experience eczema in the scalp. Then you would do the slippery elm and the rosemary. What about hair loss? So for hair loss, an excellent mixture for hair loss would be probably 1/4 cup of coconut oil and 1/4 cup of the castor oil. And then rosemary. So with the rosemary essential oil, you're probably looking about 6 drops. And what the person does is they massage that into their scalp, tie it up in a knot, and try and leave that all day. Someone said, can I sleep with it? Well, if you want, you can sleep with it. And then when it's washed out, be very cautious on the shampoo you use. And I'm going to give you a name of what you never want in your shampoo. It's called sodium lauryl sulfate. And sodium lauryl sulfate is what they usually put into shampoo, sometimes even put it into toothpaste to make it foam. And what sodium lauryl sulfate, it's a chemical that kills the hair follicles. So you don't want that. If you're not sure what the names are on your products, Google them. Which is, it's not hard to do. Yeah?
Have you also a recipe when we would like to make our own shampoo?
I don't have a recipe for making your own shampoo, but remember the guy with the big orange woolly hair and beard? He just washes everything with sodium bicarbonate. I have heard that you can wash your hair with aloe vera, and apparently it'll even soap up. I live at Misty Mountain Health Retreat. We have an incredible range of natural shampoos and conditioners.
I have a book that talks about just using oil with essential oils to wash your hair with.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, well, you could try it. It's worth a try. 1 Thessalonians 5:21, prove all things. And hold fast to that which is good. Yeah?
I've tried to make some shampoo and I made it after soap recipe. And this is NaOH. And then I was on Facebook and asked some ladies and they said for liquid soaps you need KaOH, but I don't know where to get it. And then I read it has a lot of chemicals in it.
Yes, it's
potassium hydroxide and sodium hydroxide, and it's really potent.
It is really important when you make the soap. I have made some. It has to wait 4 to 6 weeks before you can use this soap.
It's not what a chemical is, it's just one chemical, usually if it's that. And it's really strong.
I know.
Now with hair loss, what does Ellen White say in page 127 whenever there's a health condition? Ascertain the cause. Yep. Sometimes hair loss can be because of a hormonal imbalance. Sometimes people can have drastic hair loss after huge stress. And sometimes hair loss can be because of, in fact, I've got a close friend and she straightened her hair. She's a black American lady. She straightened her hair after 20 years of straightening her hair. Those chemicals, little by little, were killing the hair follicles. And also the amazing hairdos that I see in the African countries, the tightness and the weight of those little braids can certainly cause some hair loss. So again, you have a look at what may be the cause. Because if you don't turn the tap off, you're still going to be mopping up in the other corner.
Now we see a lot of after Corona, people have really bad hair loss.
Okay, after Corona. If someone has bad hair loss, if they've got new hair coming through and you can see the tiny new growth, that's, you can assure the person the new's coming. The new's coming. I'd ask to look now at how you can use it internally, slippery elm internally. So slippery elm, and I mentioned this yesterday, slippery elm contains a growth stimulant, and that growth stimulant stimulates rapid healing. So not only does slippery elm contain a growth stimulant, slippery elm, it coats and it soothes and it heals the lining of the gastrointestinal tract. So it's a wonderful herb to give to people if they've got a sore throat. And I mentioned that 3 weeks ago when I was in Scotland, I had a sore throat. And that certainly helped. It sometimes was enough to ease it, to be able to sleep at night. Slippery elm coats and soothes and heals wherever it goes. We had a lady who had her esophagus was ulcerated. Why was her esophagus ulcerated? She had a very bad case of reflux. And when we go on our journey through the gut, I'm going to address reflux in detail. So what we did was, before she went to bed every night, we gave her slippery elm. And the best way to mix it is 1 teaspoon in a cup of hot water. Must be hot, because if you mix it in cold water, it can go a little lumpy. You could even mix it in half a cup of boiling water and mix it quickly, and then add the cold, and then it'll go a bit smooth. Not many people are like my son Peter, who liked it lumpy. It's much easier to take when it is smooth. And I always say to the staff, if we've got someone on slippery elm, wait till they're standing in front of you, mix it up and give it to them, because the longer it sits, the thicker it gets. Do you remember when I was making that charcoal poultice yesterday? That I kept having to add water because the longer that charcoal sat, the thicker it got. So for the person with the ulcerated esophagus, again, you've got to ascertain the cause and assess the reflux. And that little muscle that goes into the stomach, it can be relaxed, because when it's relaxed, it's closed. And it's magnesium that relaxes it. Remember this morning with the questions and answer, and I said we use magnesium a little bit? That's one of the areas we use magnesium. And the magnesium that we use is magnesium citrate. And that's the easiest magnesium to absorb into the body, easily absorbed. And we gave her slippery elm before every meal and before bed at night. And that brought almost instantaneous relief. Yes?
I have had these tablets to suck on with magnesium in it for my reflux, and it helps also.
Yeah. And you can see why. Because it relaxes that muscle that goes into the stomach from the esophagus. As you will see when we go on our journey through the gastrointestinal tract. But also, what we had to address was the food she was eating, making sure there was nothing that irritated. So you've also got to do all of that. So we gave her slippery elm before every meal and before she went to bed at night. And remember, it's got a growth stimulant. So when you have it, well, when this lady had it before she went to bed at night and she's swallowing it, can you see remnants of it sticking and lining that gut? And so that growth stimulant can begin to work. But to have an ulcerated esophagus, that didn't happen overnight. And that's another illustration that many are sick through ignorance. They are not sure what to do for these simple things. Great. So with the slippery elm, that can be used for ulcers in the stomach, an ulcerated stomach. It will coat, soothe and heal the lining of the gut. Yes?
And also in the colon.
We're getting there. We're only up to here now. Now, coming down, and most problems are in the colon because the contents of the small intestine is liquid. So when we come through to the colon, so we've got problems like irritable bowel syndrome, Crohn's disease, colitis, gastritis. They are all inflammation of the gastrointestinal tract. And the different names usually apply to different areas of the gastrointestinal tract. And it'll coat and soothe and heal the lining of the gut. When someone has a very severe case of slippery elm, of colitis, how would you know they had a severe case? They're going 10 times a day. And the feces, it should not be liquid. And it should not be like rabbit pellets. It should be soft. soft with a little bit of form. One of our guests said, "I've never talked about such things so much." But there's some of the signs as to what your body's doing. Now, if in the feces there are partially digested foods, that's an indication that the food's not getting digested properly up here. If the feces is dark, very dark, it can indicate that there's bleeding higher up. If there's fresh blood in the feces, it can indicate that maybe it's hemorrhoids, because if it's fresh blood, it'll just be near the exit of the feces. But we have had some guests, in fact we had one last night, "I'm bleeding." And then we check, "But you had beetroot juice yesterday." Sometimes it's beetroot juice. It's as simple as that. And if someone is going 10 times a day, they can take the slippery elm every hour. You can't overdo it. It's such a safe herb. You cannot overdo it. Now, if someone has a very severe case and need a little bit extra, maybe it's quite chronic, we do 80% golden seal. Golden seal is a root. It's grown in forests in Europe, and it takes 7 years to grow before it can be harvested, and it's one of, I think frankincense is your most expensive herb that you can buy, but the golden seal is not far behind it. It's very, very expensive, but you do not need very much. So a few things about golden seal. Sorry, that's not right. It's 80% slippery elm, and it's 10% golden seal. And I'm going to show you why we put this in the mix, and it's 10% myrrh. Myrrh is a gum resin, and so often you'll buy myrrh as like little lumps. Remember, it's a gum resin, comes from the gum of a tree. So we put it in a little coffee grinder and grind it up to be able to make this mix. Golden seal is a root, and you might be able to buy as a powder, but if you can't buy as a powder, they're very fine roots. You can also blend that up, because for this you need the powders. So we mix that up in a jar, and we have given that the name gut repair. So that's our recipe for gut repair. Now, the reason we use the golden seal is because golden seal, he has a nickname. He's called King of Tonics to all mucous membranes. But not only is it the King of Tonics to all mucous membranes, what does this mean? It means that when it's going and touching the mucous membrane, it is stimulating healing and it's toning it. When you mix the slippery elm, it's slimy. I guess slippery is a nice way to say slimy. But it needs to be in the gastrointestinal tract, because the whole of our gastrointestinal tract is lined with mucus. Not only do we use this golden seal because it's King of Tonics to all mucous membranes, it's a very wide range antimicrobial. So what that means is it's antifungal, it's antibacterial. So if there's any unwanted pathogens there, it can wipe them out. I had a lady on gut repair who'd had irritable bowel for many years. She changed her diet, as we'll see when we go through the journey of the gut. Changing the diet is also very important. Remember the 5 allergens? They appear to be incredibly irritating to the gut when it's in an inflamed state. So soft food. Sometimes when someone's got irritable bowel, you can't even give them raw food. So they can't, the raw carrot, it's just too harsh on the gut. And they might even have to eat white rice because you've got to be very, very tender to that gut when it is so inflamed. So we had a lady who came to our program. She was eating the very food that was inflaming it. She didn't know. And we gave her the gut repair, which is this mix here. And she rang me up, about 2 months later. She said, I'm so much better. She said, I'm not bleeding from the colon anymore. She said, I don't have the cramping anymore. She said, I'm so much better. But she said, I ran out of gut repair, so I just bought some slippery elm. But she said, it's not as good. I want gut repair. So for some people, the slippery elm is enough. And for those who are a little bit more serious, then we go over to gut repair. And you can see why we add the golden seal. It's a powerful herb. It's very expensive. I have it because there's almost nothing that is as good as golden seal. It's very good. Yes?
How many times do you take it and how much?
It all depends. If someone's going 10 times a day and are bleeding from the colon and are getting cramping, you can give it to them every hour. And as things settle down, you ease back, maybe 2 hourly, maybe 3 times a day, and then just before bed at night. So you play with it. Remember what you're looking for. You're looking for the response. Sometimes with the tea that we give our guests, most people on the fasting days, they just go as they usually go. But occasionally we get someone who'll go 5 times in the morning. And I'll say, take some slippery elm, that'll slow it down a little bit. And they said, I took it, but it didn't work. Well, you need more. Can you see that? You need more. So I said, take it every half hour until things slow down. That worked. So you're training the people because people don't know. They're totally ignorant. If someone says, the colon tea doesn't work for me, so I say, well, you need more. Some people need 1 cup, some people need 3 cups, and we'll look at that in detail when we go on our journey through the gut. But I want to take golden seal aside for a moment and show you where else it can be used. Because it's king of tonics to all mucous membranes, you use it wherever there's mucus. So let's begin up here with the eye. So eyes. There's a herb called eyebright. And eyebright can be used for all eye problems. It doesn't matter what the problem is. You can use eyebright. And it's a fine leaf. And we put that with, so what's the eyeball floating in? A mucousy fluid. So what will we use? Because it's king of tonics to all mucous membranes. Can you see that? Yeah. So we use golden seal as well. Now the rule of thumb for herbs is 1 teaspoon to 1 cup of water. That's the rule of thumb. And sometimes, as you'll see, there might be a variation, but that's the rule of thumb. In the majority of cases, that's what you do. It's like the grated ginger we did yesterday. Put teaspoon, cup of water. To me, that's just right. For some, it's too hot. Haven't met anyone that says it's not hot enough yet. So, usually 1 teaspoon for a cup. So with this mix, what they're going to do is they're going to pour boiling water on it, and they can when the golden seal is just a powder. But if the golden seal comes in a root form, that needs to boil. So let me show you with herbs. You always boil the root and the bark and the berries. Whereas when you have just got dried leaf, you you just pour boiling water on. And then put a cover on it and it seeps. So you pour the boiling water on the leaf and the flowers. So what we've got here, we've got leaf and we've got a root. You can pour boiling water on it if it's a powder, because it's so ground up, just letting it sit will be able to extract what the active ingredients out of it. But if it's a root, then you would boil that. So let's say we do 1/4 teaspoon, and you can do any amount. 1/4 teaspoon of this and 1/4 teaspoon, 1/4 teaspoon of the eyebright and 1/4 teaspoon of the golden seal. Let's say it's in a root. Well, 1/4 teaspoon, then you'd go with 1/2 cup, wouldn't you? Because that comes to 1/2 teaspoon, so now you've got 1/2 cup of water. So what you would do is you would boil the golden seal root in 1/2 cup of water. It's always a very gentle simmer. I always boil my herbs in glass, Pyrex glass. Now we go to the second-hand shops and get X coffee percolators. They're perfect. I've even had so many people send them to me. We've got about a dozen of them now. Because you can get a bit of a reaction with the stainless steel. And if you ever go to a Chinese doctor and get his herbs, he will specify, don't cook up the herbs in stainless steel. You want them in glass or ceramic. So ideally. So you would gentle simmer, not a furious boil. I just bring it to the boil, turn it down very low, put the lid on, always the lid on, and let it simmer. It's usually 10 minutes is enough. 10 minutes is usually enough, and it's a gentle simmer. And then when you turn the heat off, then you would put the eyebright leaf in. And then put the lid on again. And what you do with this tea is you let it cool. And when it's cold, then you strain it. And then you wash the eyes with a little eye bath. And you might wash the eye 3 times a day maybe. Why would you wash the eye with this tea mix? You would do it for cataracts. You would do it for glaucoma. You would do it for dry eyes. You would do it for red eyes. So any complaint in the eye. And why have we put the golden seal in, students? Because it's king of tonics. Yeah, it's king of tonics to the mucous membranes. So you need to know why. Where are you? Why? We need to know why. Now you know what? You might give this tea to 6 people and no one will ask why, but then someone will ask why. So it's important to know, and they will have confidence in you when you're able to explain why you're doing it. Because the worst thing you can say is, oh, it's good for your eyes. We've had a few guests come and do our program who've complained of dry eyes, sore eyes. They've got eye drops. The eye drops sting, but they're not really helping. And then they wash their eyes with this. And I leave it to them. If twice a day is enough, twice a day. If 3 times enough feels better, 3 times a day. Remember, we teach that everyone should be their own doctor because only you know your response or how it feels. And by the end of the week, we have guests saying to us, my eyes have never been so good. The dry eyes, the itchy eyes have cleared up. So it's a very powerful mix. So for glaucoma and cataracts, they might be done 3 times a day. And in the evening, might put the castor oil over. So that's a very nice combination. So what we're going to do now is we're going to keep going down the head. So now we come to the sinus. And you'll find many people with sinus problems. And in the Mayo Clinic in the 1990s, a group of doctors discovered that sinus problems are due to fungus. And we had an ear, nose and throat specialist nurse to our program, and she said, you wouldn't believe the green slime we pull out of people's sinuses. And she said the doctors acknowledge it is a fungus. So why is it growing there? Why? It's usually because the person has a wheat, dairy, might be oat, peanut allergy. And whenever there's an allergy, excess mucus. Have you heard people snorting? People snort a bit when they're, the snort. They might do it when they've got a cold, but some people just do it all the time. Do you know that you know what that tells me straight away? They've got an allergy. Because when there's an allergy, the body makes excess mucus. So if a person's eating these foods and they've got this excess mucus, blowing their nose all day, or maybe blowing it every morning, that tells me they've got an allergy. But do you know what else is happening? They don't know that. Sometimes people think this is life, I just do this. So what's happening up here? We're getting a little bit of irritation, we're getting a little bit of damage. Now our cells evolve into a bacterial and then fungal form to clean up the waste. Can you see the evolution of the fungal developing there? That's the main reason. Because if fungus is living up there, there's a reason. Sometimes it can be breathing in mould or breathing in chemicals, causing irritation there, causing the excess mucus. And sometimes that's fed because the person's drinking Coca-Cola every day. And can you see it can be a whole lot of factors? Whole lot of factors. So to heal sinus, number one, in case of sickness, cause should be ascertained. Number two, wrong habits corrected. Unhealthful conditions changed. Get out of the mouldy house. Change jobs so you're not breathing in chemicals all day. Change the diet. Then nature is to be assisted in her efforts to expel impurities and re-establish right conditions in the body. And what they can do is they can breathe in hot steam, you know that old hot steam. But you know what, most people, they get relief while they're breathing in the hot steam with maybe a bit of eucalyptus oil on, but you notice 10 minutes later it's clogged again. The reason is they don't end the treatment with cold, ice cold wipes over their face. Because they finish the treatment, now they've got these open pores and this hot skin that can chill against cold air. Every hot treatment should be finished with cold water. But what they can also do is they can sniff golden seal powder. Because what's our sinus lined with? Mucus. And remember what mucus is? What the tonic to mucus is? Golden seal. So we get them to put a little bit, see there's a little dip in the hand there, and it's traditionally it was called the snuff dip, because in the old days people would put their snuff there and sniff. So they can use their little snuff dipper. I've got quite a nice one. Nice little dip there. But what you have to do is they have to go to a mirror so that they can see when their nostril is over their little snuff dip. And you just put the tiniest amount in. You only want to put a tiny amount in. Remember, this stuff's expensive. And you don't need much. Just a tiny little pinch. And they don't go, otherwise they'll feel like the top of their head's going to explode. It's just little sniffs. Just little by little sniff it up, and you can tell when it's hit the mark because there's a bitterness in the back of their throat. And then a little bit more on, and I was doing one lady one day, she said, "Is this right?" and breathed out, and the golden seal. Oh no. You don't want to lose the golden seal. It's like gold. It's like gold dust. It's the colour of gold dust, actually. It's brilliant yellow. So how often would they do that? Or they could do that, 2 or 3 times a day. If it brings relief, do it more. Encourage them not to blow their nose for about 10 minutes. Let it sit up there. Keep sniffing. Keep it up, and maybe then blow their nose. And when they blow their nose, it'll be fluorescent yellow from the golden seal snuff. Now, what are we doing there? King of tonics to warm mucous membranes. It helps those mucous membranes to heal, but it cleans it up. You see that? So this nurse that came to us, that was a ear, nose and throat specialist nurse, they get the same people coming back every 5 years to have this clean out. See, if you don't turn the tap off, the whole problem's going to continue. So we had a lady attend our program, and she had very, very painful sinus, to the point that she was on pain-killing medication every day. She was probably about 38, she was a little overweight, and we looked at her diet. Yeah, tick, 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 yes, she's eating all the allergens. She didn't know. So she came back a year later, and we told her what to do: stop the foods, start sniffing the golden seal, and she started to do that with us. She came back a year later, and when she came in, I didn't know it was her. She'd lost 10 kilos. She looked amazing. She said, "You don't remember me, do you?" And I said, "I'm trying." And as she spoke, I started to recognise her face. She said, "My life has just turned around." She said, after leaving Misty Mountain, she said, "I have not taken one painkiller." You see, the pain was due to the sinus, the block in the sinus. She said, "I've lost weight, as you can see." She said, "You wouldn't believe the quality of life I now have. Do you know life should be good? It should be good every day of our life." She said to me, "My mother was getting very concerned. She thinks I lost too much weight." Mind you, she looked good. So she insisted I have blood tests. She said the blood tests come back perfect. It was a lovely story of how someone struggled for so long and yet had an incredible turnaround. Mouth ulcers. Remember, we're looking at all the mucus areas that golden seal can help. Yes?
I just wanted to say I like with sinusitis to do hot and cold.
Yes.
It's really good.
The hot and cold is very good. That is true. And of course the hot steam is hot, but most people miss out on the cold. So let's go to mouth ulcers. Rinsing the mouth with some golden seal tea after a meal, and also before bed, because remember, whatever you do in there before bed, you get remnants while you sleep. Let's go down into the stomach ulcer. You add golden seal to the slippery elm, and it helps to heal the stomach ulcer. Irritable bowel, we just mentioned those: Crohn's disease, colitis. UTI, urinary tract infection. When they take the golden seal, it comes out in the urine. So it disinfects the whole way down as it goes through the urinary system and the kidneys. Yes?
I want to ask you about that. Do you have additional remedies for urine infection?
So for UTI, and you can get golden seal in a tablet form. It is incredibly bitter. So a lot of people prefer to take it in a capsule or a tablet form. I personally think in a capsule it's too much and it's a waste. So half a capsule at a time is enough. Yeah.
Why is it too much?
Well, it's so expensive. You try and buy it. It's incredibly expensive.
I could only buy it in America.
And half a teaspoon, half a teaspoon is a little bit much. That's why I say just have half a capsule at a time. So with UTI, cranberry. Now how cranberry works is that it causes a slippery coating on the lining of the bladder making it incredibly hard for any microbes to hold on to the wall of the bladder. That's basically how it works. So you put cranberry and golden seal together, you get a very nice mix for a urinary tract infection.
That's powdered cranberry.
Well, cranberry is incredibly bitter. So most cranberries that you buy, dried cranberries, they've got sugar in them. I went into Trader Joe's in the US once, which is a big health store, and I'm looking at all the cranberries. There was not one that did not have sugar in it. So you're almost best to buy the tablet. They're almost inedible. They're so bitter. So bitter. But if you can get dried cranberries without sugar, you can certainly do it. I have seen cranberries that have been dried with apple juice, so they're not so bitter.
You wouldn't know if the Swedish lingonberry could be used. It's similar to cranberry, but it's not the same.
Okay, so maybe that's an option. Yep. So looking at all the areas where you can use the golden seal, it's a remarkable herb. There's one other area we use it, and that is in a tea. We call it digestive tea. In fact, we affectionately call it Dig tea at Misty Mountain. And we give this to every single one of our guests. We've had incredible results with the digestive tea. And it is 1 part dandelion, and it's 1 part licorice, 1 part gentian, that very bitter herb, and it is 1/2 part golden seal. So these are all roots, so they need to be boiled. But you'll buy the dried herbs and you mix it together in a jar. We cannot buy golden seal at the moment. It's very hard to get golden seal. So our office girl was able to find capsules, so we're opening the capsules. So the rule of thumb is, remember, 1 teaspoon of these dried herbs to 1 cup of water, and because they're roots, you've got a 10-minute simmer, and then you let it sit. And it's the sitting while it's hot, more of the properties are going into the water. Yeah?
Is there a reason why peppermint is not included, or even fennel? Isn't that well known for digestion?
Yeah, they help. There's quite a few things that help with digestion, but we've just gone for the bitter roots. And the dose is 1/4 cup hot just before the meal. Dr. Kellogg said a great way to boost digestion is to have 1/4 cup of very hot water just before the meal. The hot water going into the stomach stimulates the release of the digestive juices. So we've gone 1 step further and made it a hot, bitter tea. And when that bitter tea is in the mouth, it's already stimulating. The message goes to the brain, the liver starts releasing more, your parietal glands, the glands in your stomach start releasing the digestive enzymes. We've talked a little bit about low hydrochloric acid, and this is a great hydrochloric acid booster, is the digestive tea. I give it to my husband every morning. I have it every morning when I'm at home. And as I said, I've got a very good husband. He'll do whatever I tell him. He said he doesn't actually mind it now. Most people, the first time they drink it, they go, oh! Because it is bitter. But the licorice gives it a bit of sweetness. So what I have been covering is the golden seal. We've also helped a few people that have got very stubborn ulcers. And ulcers often happen with diabetics on the shin. And the reason they happen on the shin is because the blood supply there is quite poor. So we had a lady bring her mother, and her mother was in a wheelchair. We have one room that has disabled access. But when someone is like that, we say to people, we are not a hospital. So if someone needs care, they have to bring a carer with them. Because remember, what we are is teachers, teaching people how to be their own doctors. It would be certainly wonderful if we had a hospital that did that. And I've been reading the autobiography of a Dr. Gertrude Brown, who was trained with Dr. Kellogg at Battle Creek Sanitarium. So this is the mid-1800s, late 1800s. And she said, she worked there for, 6 years. She said it was the most wonderful place to work, was Battle Creek. Have you heard of Battle Creek? They had 1,000 beds. Yeah. Huge. And they said Dr. Kellogg was an excellent surgeon, but he rarely did surgery. He did everything possible. Surgery was the very last resort. It was so nice to read that. And she also said in her autobiography, she said Dr. Kellogg was a living example of the health message. Isn't that nice? Wouldn't you like that said of yourself? Remember, ye are our epistles, known and read of all men. And the staff all read that man, and he was a testimony. So it has happened before that there has been basically a health retreat / hospital that did implement these principles. And what also she said was many sick people would go there, and she said they would walk out. She said, I've worked in many hospitals. She was the matron in a big hospital in London for a while, and then in her 40s she went to Edinburgh, and her and husband both trained as doctors. She said, I have never seen anywhere like Battle Creek. The people would walk out healthy. She said, I've never seen a hospital like that.
What was her name again?
Dr. Gertrude Brown. And my Scottish mum, Ruth, she met Dr. Gertrude Brown. So she was telling me her story. So I said to her, I'd love to. She said, I've got her book. And in the front of the book, I've actually got it in my room. I'll bring it down if you like. Dr. Gertrude Brown has written in there. It's a thrilling story. So thrilling. Unfortunately, the pharmaceutical company is so big now, it's almost, it's almost impossible to have such a place. So what we do is we have little health centres. And isn't that the best way, just one-to-one? So I was talking about ulcers. So we've had some stubborn ulcers. So this lady brought her mother, she was 80, had a really stubborn ulcer. So what you do is clean it out with hydrogen peroxide. Something else you can clean it out with is seawater. And to make seawater, a cup of Celtic salt to 1 teaspoon of seawater. So I notice you don't live near the sea.
You mix it.
And if you... Pardon?
1 cup of water, I believe, too.
Yeah.
1 teaspoon of salt, Celtic salt, yeah. And you can wash it with that, and then you put it in the sun. Do you know in the old days they used to wheel, this is Florence Nightingale, wheel the patients out onto the veranda and put their bed sores and their ulcers in the sun. Yeah. In the sun. The sun is a wonderful healer. So that was part of it. And then we would sprinkle a mix inside the ulcer of equal parts golden seal and cayenne pepper. Because one of the problems with an ulcer is that the blood supply is very poor to the area. And what does cayenne pepper do? Moves blood. And what's the blood? It's the life of the flesh. Within 1 week, it was just incredible, the response we saw. Most people, when you sprinkle the golden seal and cayenne pepper powder, they don't feel the cayenne, because that's one of the problems, they don't have a blood supply, and the blood supply feeds the nerves. And little by little, we saw it shrink up. And we have seen many ulcers heal with that, and people, I've told them what to do, and they've got back to me and they've said, wow, this is remarkable. Now you can see why we're doing this. The cayenne peppers to bring the blood, and the blood's the healer, and the golden seal, king of tonics, and also strong antimicrobial. I was talking to a lady in Scotland last week who 10 years ago used to work in an aged care facility, and she told me they used to use maggots to clean up wounds. Have you heard that? She said we'd get the maggots in little containers, and she said you'd sprinkle it onto the wound, and they're like little threads, and you'd wrap it up and leave it 24 hours, and when you opened it up, she said they were all like fat grubs. And she said the wound was clean from the blowfly. What's your Swiss word for that? I don't know. Do you know blowflies? Do you know when you've got something dying, the blowflies will lay their maggots? Yeah, those little horrible crawly things.
Could it just be in a normal housefly?
No,
You can't use
no, it has to be a blowfly. The maggots come from the blowfly. Oh. And apparently they used to use it in the war. If they had wounds that wouldn't heal, they would let the blowfly lay the maggots. Anyway, this Scottish lady was telling me that's what they did. Blowfly? That's what we call it. I don't know what you call it. Do you know they say don't leave meat out or a blowfly will land and the maggots will start to eat it? Does anyone understand what I'm saying? Yes. Oh, good.
So how often do you use this?
You might do it 3 times a day.
Thank you, Sister Antoinette. Everyone, did you enjoy knowing what these natural herbs are for and how we can use them? I certainly did. I know time is of the essence now, but I'll just recap a little. We learned that slippery elm, it is good to make a tea that is good for the scalp. And we can also use it along with rosemary, thyme for head lice. We also learned that we can also use it for hair loss. We can mix coconut oil, castor oil, rosemary oil, put all of those together, massage the scalp, and that will stimulate it and the hair will start growing back. We also learned as well that we can use it internally to stimulate growth, and for ulcerated stomachs, we can use it as well. We can also use the golden seal with the slippery elm and the myrrh if we are having colitis or any of those digestive problems. And that is very important for us to learn because many of us has these sort of problems. And for the eyes, we can use the eye bright and the golden seal to wash our eyes, especially for people with cataract and glaucoma and even dry eyes. And for the sinuses, we use the golden seal, just sniff a little up in our nostrils, and that will help tremendously for ulcers in the mouth. You wash again with the golden seal. And for the UTI, you mix the golden seal with the cranberry. Anybody has any questions? Any question? Okay, the other thing we learned about was the skin. And we could use hydrogen peroxide if somebody has a ulcer, like on the shin or the ankle. You mix the hydrogen peroxide and use it to wash the sore, or you could use seawater with Celtic salt, 1 teaspoon of seawater and 1 teaspoon of Celtic salt. And then when you clean it out, you put some cayenne pepper and that will heal it very nicely. We did not get to the aloe vera, but I'll just tell you the aloe vera, it's used for burns. You just cut it open, cut off the little raised, the serrated edges, cut it in two, and apply it directly to the wound and the burn, that is, and let it stay there for 24 hours. Wrap it nicely with a bandage, and that will heal it with no scars. Everyone, it was very nice being here with you, and I do hope you learned something. So let us pray to close. Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for these lessons that we're learning each day, how we can help ourselves and help each other. Be with everyone on the line. Keep us as we move now to Vespers, and continue to shed your light upon us, I pray. Amen. Goodbye, everyone, and thank you for coming. Next week, there'll be another very informative topic. So